Welcome back to the Robes Away channel. I'm your host Mark, and today we are taking a test drive on the brand of Tom Ford. And this one right here called Lost Cherry. Now we have two fragrances off to the side here because this falls into this type of category, the fruity category. And the fruity category is, especially when you're looking at this price point, you know, this video is going to be a lot more in depth of what you come to expect from this genre, what you come to expect from the brand of Tom Ford, and what are the expectations of a fruity scent, especially at that price point. Now, this one right here is one of the most hyped and maybe the one that really got things going for the cherry scents in the fragrance game. And this one is one of the leaders of the cherry wave. So good that Tom Ford, of course, made this a collection, a trifecta that they did in 2023. Now, the brand of Tom Ford is my guilty pleasure. You know, anybody that knows me, follows my channel, knows that, you know, do I feel like Tom Ford's a brand that is a, you know, a premium brand, like one of the best in the game as far as looking at everything? No. Do they make very much really good utility fragrances? Yes, especially for a fragrance head like me. Now, the brand of Tom Ford has things like Amber Absolute, to a Tuscan Leather, to Tobacco Vanille, to Sahara Noir. The list goes on and on. Tobacco Oud. I absolutely love the brand. The thing about the brand is that I love the subtle complexities that a lot of people, and again, it's subtle complexities that a lot of people won't get because they're not deep. They're not looking at the complexities of these kind of scents like fragrance reviewers like myself do. Things like Tuscan Leather, they're gonna think leather. Smells like leather? Yeah, good enough. Amber Absolute, smells like amber? Yeah, dark syrupy thing? Yeah, that's all it is, right? Oud Wood, Oud, Tobacco Vanille, both, right? Tobacco and vanilla. And you're gonna get those in the forefront. That is the main idea, yes, of all those fragrances. However, you know, someone like myself, and people like that do buy those are happy with the results, right? Leather is pretty good leather, right? The oud is pretty good oud, so on and so forth. But frag heads like me, depending on the nose that creates these type of fragrances for Tom Ford, really look at the subtle things that really give those scents complexity under the main picture. There's always a main picture on these things. Amber Absolute is not just a little amber thing. There's things in the back end that play along to make that central theme. Tobacco Vanille, same thing. There's spices in there that a lot of reviewers or people, they just miss. They just think of the major idea. So now simplistic can be a double-edged sword, right? Fruity scents as well. Well, why? Well, price, synthetic, cheap smelling can be that sword, and the bad end of the sword, right? It's too expensive, and you're gonna see that in fragrance reviews on this particular release. Synthetic, smells like so and so forth, not worth the price. Sure, you can get a cherry-based scent now for under $50, easily, a good one. Cherry-based, yeah. You can get a grapefruit one. You can get an apple-based one. Fruity fragrances, that's their double-edged sword. Pricey ones, that is their sword. Now, with fruity scents, it's really hard to be niche and be worth niche prices. And what I mean by that, you know, niche is a very big, complex word that you can have a niche fragrance that's $25 right up to thousands of dollars. It doesn't mean anything. I'm talking about the expensive stuff, right? With body sprays, among other things, fruity scents will be correlated to those and make a nose think twice about buying a fragrance that's $200 or more. Grapefruit, great example, and that's why we have Pamplemousse in front of me right here. Grapefruit is my example, it's everywhere. But will the brand go an extra mile to make it authentic enough, stand out enough, right? Grapefruit's everywhere. You can get it in a lotion of some sort. It doesn't really, like body mist, things like that. Is the nose talented enough to put things around that particular note to make it interesting? Is the brand daring enough to make something a little different than what's out there? So as far as the grapefruit goes, is the brand going to make it vivid enough? Is there going to be touches behind the grapefruit note that will make it tart, will make it this, that? It's about the brand and the nose. Case in point, here's Pamplemousse by Guerlain. In my opinion, the best grapefruit in the game, bar none. Price, who cares? It's under $100. Very cheap. I've smelt niche brands. I've smelt a lot of grapefruits in my day. This is not the most expensive one, but they made it tart. They made it authentic to my nose. So this is one of those examples that cheap can smell expensive to my nose, at least. Another prime example of niche is Enchanted Forest right here. The very best blackcurrant in the game, bar none. This scent, made by Bertrand de Chauffour, an excellent perfumier, is hands down, leaps, bounds, better. Like there's nothing even touching this. Like this one, yeah, there is some niche fragrances that do this kind of idea. This right here stands alone by itself. I've never smelt a blackcurrant as good as. If you like blackcurrant and you ask me, the answer will always, 10 out of 10 will be this. Go get this. Now this is hard to find now. But cherry, let's go back to this one. Cherry in itself, what are you gonna do to set yourself apart? Either with surrounding notes to make it perhaps classy, or are you gonna make the notes a little more vivid, a little more interesting? It's just those subtle things. Like this has, you know, that grapefruit that has a little bit of that tartness that goes, oh, that's different. And that's making it really authentic to my nose. Now, I know this is a long story, a long introduction to Lost Cherry for just a simple cherry scent, but it paints you the picture that I, a fragrance reviewer, looks at. The brand of Tom Ford and the nose of Louise Turner did a little bit of both here. And what I'm talking about is trying to set itself apart, either by surrounding the cherry with notes that may class the thing up, make it a little different, that maybe these dupes and designer brands can't really replicate the whole thing, and also make the note more vivid. And I feel like, not that they excelled in that, I think the cherry idea can be mastered better than this. I think there's an opportunity, a lane there that this, I don't feel like this feels like premium. You can't beat Enchanted Forest. As far as a straightforward blackcurrant fragrance, you can't. Here it's good. Now the brand of Tom Ford and the nose did a little bit of something here. They utilized the bitter almond from the tonka bean, which was also utilized in Effin' Fabulous. And they took this, and I'm saying this rather lightly, this, you know, juvenile cheap cherry, and class it up a little bit, right, with this almond note. Now, also you've introduced layers to the cherry note in the opening to this one. That really makes this one better than most out there. To make it more vivid than most, more interesting than most. If you smell it upon first sniff, you're gonna be like, this is an excellent cherry. But what happens behind the scenes once that cherry dies off? Because it does. Now it does lose steam in the back end in this release, and I'll get into that, but honestly they did very well here. And that's why it took me so long into my diehards that, you know, it's been 2 weeks in the making, this fragrance review, this test drive, is because of this idea, this introduction here. I'm trying to paint a picture of what Lost Cherry is to me. Now, before we get into that, of course, let's get to our sponsor of the day, FragranceX.com. I wanted to take time to thank FragranceX. You can get a bottle of Lost Cherry on their site. Support me by utilizing my coupon code ROBES08, which is, of course, my channel name. And you put in their coupon section and you get 15% off on your fragrance purchase. Now that my long-winded introduction is done, let's get into it. Let's go under the hood. Let's take a look at some stats on this one. Release date was back in 2018. Nose is Louise Turner. Louise has done a lot of pretty good solid releases recently. Le Mâle Le Parfum, Fahrenheit 32, Cherry Smoke, of course, Fougère d'Argent, among others. Major notes to my nose, of course, it's a cherry-based fragrance, and yeah, it has a wallop of it. The tonka bean, most notably the bitter almond in it, is absolutely stunning in this. I think the cherry and the bitter almond are your 1-2 punch as far as outstanding notes in this release. And then vanilla, again, most likely from the tonka bean. Now, right off the bat, let's, it is my scent of the day, but I'm going to remind myself of this these atomizers. So weak, but they do the job. So, right off the bat, that introduction is outstanding. It is. I love it. And I'm a gourmand lover. I love sweet scents. I love fruity scents when done well. You know, I don't want to think, and a lot of people will say it reminds them of cherry cough syrup and things like that. And it's all about your representation, what your brain gives you when you were a child. If you got a lot of cherry cough syrup, this might smell like it to you. Totally understand that. And I had my fair share of cherry cough syrup back in the day. But this is, to me, it's a outstanding representation of cherries. One of the best I've smelled. It's syrupy, and it's just exactly what I want in a fruity scent. It's syrupy, so it has that stickiness, that syrupiness. It's dark, so the cherries aren't, these brand new cherries that, they just came out and they're light red. No, these are, I'm sitting in my juices, dark, almost boozy, and it has some boozy qualities, but not the way you think. And I'm going to get into that too, but it's sweet, and basically what it reminds me of is very concentrated cherries that sat in their own juices. Basically, in a nutshell, it's that. And cut up cherries to full cherries to the pit, and I'm going to get to the pit with the bitter almond, but just everything is there. Now, my initial process here is the cherry is a maraschino cherry, right? I'm thinking Black Forest cake, me personally, without the chocolate, of course. The cherries on top of the cake to the cherry filling in the middle of the cake. It reminds me of that. Now, I don't want to, make it sound that it's too gourmandish, because it does have those tendencies, but forget the cake itself. There's no chocolate here, but there's bitter almond, so there is some other maybe pastry that I could think about, like think marzipan, things like that. So that's your 1-2 punch. Bitter almond, cherry. That's your introduction. And honestly, the cherry has its limelight like really, really early on, but that almond comes in, almost steals the show. And I'm going to get into that. Now, the cherry here is at a high volume, and it's thick, and it really is all you're smelling. Taking away that bitter almond, but yeah, it's at high volume, very concentrated, it's central. It will last you at best a few hours at this kind of concentration. It will fall eventually to this vanillic backbone that this fragrance has, that's obviously sweet, among other notes. Now, the cherry here goes many ways. It's syrupy, almost boozy, in a way that, not to the point that I'm thinking this is like a cherry-based booze, like alcohol. I don't see that personally for me. More that it's sitting in its own juices and there may be some sort of alcohol involved. More sticky, syrupy than anything else, honestly. The cherry facet, very concentrated. I love that. There's a tart aspect to it that also amplifies. It really helps that facet as well. A lot of pretenders don't have that facet that Lost Cherry does. So again, going to dupes and things like that, keep that in mind. When looking at a fruity note, you want 3D. I always talk about 3-dimensional, like things like this blackcurrant has some green aspects to it. It's not just the fruit. This has its tartness with the grapefruit. This has the exact same thing. Think like stewed cherries, like, almost having it in a pot, hot, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Big, rich, dark, dense cherries. It's beautiful. It is. All right, now that I put the two imposters away, I'm not going to talk about grapefruit and blackcurrant anymore. It's all central to this beautiful thing, Lost Cherry. And this cherry gets met with a really, oh man, it steals the show. Really impressive bitter almond note. Tonka bean, yes, from the Tonka. It shares the spotlight with the cherry, and it does that fairly quickly. And honestly, when I say it steals the show, I think personally, like the cherry gets its, its flowers in the opening, but in the mid, this almond note is that good that it steals the show. It really does. Obviously, the Tonka is impressive here, and it's a good match with cherry. You get sweetness, you get creamy vanillic tendencies, you get some powdery aspects here in the introduction, but mostly the almond in here is gorgeous. Tonka is also known, of course, to throw off a cherry vibe. So again, that just helps. It's no secret that that works well with a bitter almond, vanillic tendencies. So you get lots of it in this release. The almond note in here really reminded me, and I remember, I don't know when I talked about it on my channel of Effin' Fabulous, but I felt like Effin' Fabulous needed personality because it was very gray. It's an almond Tonka thing, very white gray. And this gives it its personality. There's a splash of red. Now the almond note here really reminds me of the use of it in Effin' Fabulous from the same brand. And what that does is this kind of sets it apart from other cherry fragrances that are very pedestrian, very juvenile. It classes things up, It makes a rather pedestrian cherry note, fruity note, think cheap, and it gives it more substance. It gives it almost an expensive backing. And that's where my mind frame is going with that, is that they utilize that in this release to give it that air of class. Now, when this happens, when this almond kind of takes over a little bit, I immediately pictured the almond note as the pit of the cherry. And it's funny, like it's I don't know, it's something like that, like so minute, makes me picture something like that. You get 90% cherry juice, all that good stuff, but there's like that little 10% that the pit of the cherry, and you took a nice little bite out of the pit, and it gives you that texture, almond. That's where the almond note takes me, to be quite honest, is the pit of the cherry. And maybe that's what their idea was. I don't know. After a while, it starts introducing a jammy rose. So there's a rose in here, and jasmine. Now, if you missed those two notes in this release, I forgive you. They're very minute. And even the development of this scent is very, like if somebody told me this is linear, I'd shake your hand and say, you know your stuff. The development in this scent is very slow. It is down to a crawl. Like I could say linear in my fragrance review and I would get a lot of cosigns. And I felt it was really slow to develop. And it loses bit by bit, and you start going, no, like, oh no, the cherry's leaving. Shit, you know, like, ooh, I don't want that to go. The almond's leaving. Oh no, okay, there goes a lot of the personality, and that's what we're gonna get into later on. So if you do like this opening, and I'm not saying the overdose of cherry, because that really does come back down. I'm talking about the almond, tonka, vanillic cherry vibe here, that the redness is not as vivid anymore. It really kind of melds together. So if you like that piece of this, you're going to continue to have that for quite a while. It just slowly starts losing thickness and the principal effect of cherry, basically. So at some point in this mid, this release reminded me of one of my favorite fragrances of all time, which is over my head here. I got 2 bottles of it. I got a backup. It's that good. Tonka Imperial from Guerlain. Best tonka bean fragrance of all time. You cannot change my mind. It's been the best tonka bean fragrance ever since I've smelt it, which is probably a decade ago. I've smelt a lot of tonkas in my day. Nothing comes close to it. And I'm talking about a lot of bests in this video. And it did remind me of that fragrance at parts in here, where the cherry really mellows, the almond takes over, the tonka comes in, and there's just a small fraction part of this fragrance that reminds me a little bit of that, and that's probably why I like this so much. It has that total Tonka Imperial vibe that I love. Now, this does not smell like Tonka Imperial all the way through. No way, no how. I'm just letting you know about my experience. It had a little smidgen of like, ooh, this smells like a little bit like that, and then that goes away. So now into the mid, into the deeper dry down of Lost Cherry, where I feel a lot of, you know, frag heads like myself that dissect these things, that you know, love fragrances. We look at the high price tags and we kind of dissect them to say, hey, is it worth it or not? This is where a lot of frag heads, real frag heads, are gonna be like, this thing has no back end. And again, I'd co-sign you. Shake your hand and be like, yeah, you're right. Into the mid of Lost Cherry and in the deeper dry down, it is a slow development, but you start seeing some minor changes here. The cherry keeps fading to a ghost of itself, sadly, for cherry lovers. You know, for me, honestly, if you kept going with the Powerhouse Cherry, I'd be happy with that. Just simplistic what the opening was, I like that. The tonka pushes in the mid, but also fades. So it fades into the deeper dry down, you start losing that tonka, and all you get is this vanillic push. And the vanilla feels less creamy, less polished, I guess, in this back end. There's some woods here, faint. I got some smoke here, faint. Like the smoke itself, it's like a match being blown out, basically. There's a little bit of it. There's balsams here, again, faint. It almost, and there is some, you know, you can tell in my voice that this backbone could have been better, honestly. The florals, they're there. They're very minor. You get some sweetness from the Jamie Rose and of course the jasmine note, some cedar and sandalwood, that's your woods here. The ending starts removing what you loved from the opening, and that's the problem. The big stars of the show, the cherry, faint. Like it doesn't look like the bottle here. It looks kind of like the sticker. It's fading. It's like a light vanillic, exactly like it almost got stained a little bit with the red. That's exactly, it looks like the sticker, not the bottle anymore. That's how it smells. So the cherry, the almond, not central anymore. They're there, but there's this white musk vanillic sweetness that takes over. The vanillic portion, kind of ho-hum. You start missing the opening, basically is what I'm trying to say. Because I did. I really missed the opening in the mid of this thing. Overall, that's a solid fruity scent. It toes the line of synthetic cherry bomb to an authentic cherry fragrance that I can see many going for cheaper alternatives. I can see it just because of the main theme of this thing. The small nuances, what makes a fragrance for me, you know, a lot of you are not in it for that. And I don't blame them, right? You're gonna buy yourself a cherry fragrance that will make this cherry, the same type of thing. You're not looking for the pit of the cherry like I am. I'm a nerd, I'm a fragrance nerd. So for me, this is one of the better cherry scents that I've smelt. So I have to give it props, you know. Yeah, it might be top heavy, but there is a lot of redeeming qualities in here, right? When you start looking at cherry based scents, and I'm looking through the whole spectrum of what I've smelt as a central note, and it's hard to make it an outstanding cherry note. It's up there, and that's where I'm at with this one. Really good. Now let's get into seasons, day, night, versatility, and performance. A lot of good marks here. Performance, it's gonna get a couple knocks, but let's get into it. Seasons, I feel like the versatility of this thing, and I don't want to get into versatility, but you know, when would I wear this? Well, fall. I feel like this is the perfect time for it. Winter, spring, summer nights. This can be all seasons, honestly, but I would feel best in the tweener seasons. I feel like the more wearings would be in those fall, spring seasons. Day or night, I feel like this is a good casual scent during the day or night, but mostly a nighttime scent for me. It has that personality, it has that pop. Yeah, you could probably get yourself a little decant that you can reapply it every so often to really bring back that magic from the introduction and the mid. But again, you're looking at me like, why do I have to do that with this type of price? And not everything has to be a bomb, but at the same time, I can see, you know, the good and the bad. Versatility through the roof. Unisex, yeah, 100%. I can see men or women. I feel like this would be, on a woman, this would be magic. I haven't smelled it on a woman yet. I'm scared. But I think this is a fragrance that I can't see as a signature for men or women. I feel like this is more of a time to time. You know, you revisit it, you know, every so often and you can feel the magic. I feel like if you start wearing this daily, it's a little much, personally. Performance, and this is where Lost Cherry gets all the jokes, right? Oh yeah, you lost the cherry real quick. Yeah, it's funny. Performance, I had good performance. Like there's nothing to poo-poo on here for me. Longevity was 7 to 9 hours, which is right where I expect any fragrance to be. Anything more, good. I'm not complaining. 7 to 9 hours. Projections average, so this thing doesn't really blow the socks off. Would I like it stronger? This type of DNA, would I like it stronger? Yeah, this is not like one of those signature scents that I like, the 7 to 9 and projection is average. Like those type of scents, like office wear, things like that, I like that kind of performance. This is a wow factor, or at least it should be a wow factor fragrance, and it is in the introduction, but the wow kind of stays away. And I like these type of fragrances to have a voice, and this one, the voice is a little muted. So now on to my final thoughts, and honestly, you probably feel maybe a little ho-hum about this fragrance review. I'm not sky high on this release, but I'm not deep down in the gutter telling you it's not worth it. Sometimes fragrances like this that get a huge hype, you almost feel like grounding the fragrance review and just be straightforward with facts. You know, there's some good, there's some bad, And it all depends on you and your nose and your wallet, of course, or your purse. So Lost Cherry, my final thoughts are, as great of a cherry this scent is, the price tag will drive potential customers to dupes, and rightfully so. If a nose isn't too concerned with the intricate details of Lost Cherry and just wants this theme, they can find it elsewhere. 100%. Fruity fragrances, kinda that thing. Unfortunately, cherry is a hard sell for high-end brands. I really think having cherry as the central note is almost like shooting yourself in the foot. However, having cherry as a strong secondary note, now you're talking. You're gonna see people that would purchase more because of the other notes surrounding it. You kind of have to sell the high-end niche heads with maybe an incense note, you know, a really good one. Maybe that's what cherry smoke was all about. They're trying to do that. But that's where Lost Cherry loses a lot of people. It tried to hit the fruity market, and that's a hard sell. And this thing actually sold really well for them. Obviously, they got a couple flankers. I think this is a typical love-hate type of scent. It's either you're gonna think of childhood memories like cherry cough syrup, or you're gonna be like me and enjoy the small nuances and you're gonna purchase it. Or you're just gonna be like, too expensive, too synthetic, not giving me enough. I can see all sides of the coin here. I feel, and this is just my personal opinion, I feel like if they took a little more care into the back end of this scent and make it from a good cherry scent, which I feel is, to the best cherry scent hands down. That little extra work to the back, the introduction, they nailed it. Like, they introduced a really good bitter almond note, which is outstanding. Outstanding. Almost worth price of admission. With a outstanding cherry note that doesn't last, but very good cherry note. And that's where they lost a lot of customers, I think, at least in the making it the best in class. I think there's room for improvement because I haven't met anything that's better than this yet. Like, if you're asking me what's the best cherry, I'll still tell you this, but it has its drawbacks. The back end of this scent kind of failed us, but it doesn't mean I don't love it. And I do. I absolutely love this one. And that's why it took so long for me to review it, because there's a lot of pluses and negatives. So I'm done now with Lost Cherry. Long fragrance review for a test drive, I'll be honest. It's time for you to hit us up in the comments below. You love it, you hate it. Say your piece. Too expensive? I hear you. Synthetic? Smells like cough syrup? I hear you. I don't agree with you, but I hear you. Back end is missing? Yeah, I co-sign you on that one. But what do you think about Lost Cherry? And look forward to read your comments. Awesome. Love delving into the brand of Tom Ford, especially fragrances like this, where, I don't know, the fragrance reviews didn't give it its just due, I think, the ones on the internet. I feel like the almond note is very much something that is much better than touted by a lot of noses. So at the end of the day, a great or poor fragrance will make a lasting impression. Choose your cherry-based fragrance wisely. For me, please. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.